instructors for today, and my counterpart is, I'll let her introduce herself.
Katie Dirksen. I am the Business and Professional Development Consultant with the Asper School of Business.
Okay, so we're really happy to have you here today for
Mhm.
seminar 2 of our MBA. I'm looking at people and seeing people I haven't seen for a while. Megan, your hair is super long. And there'll be no chance to get a haircut in Manitoba anytime soon. We've just gone into lockdown again. So, okay, so basically the goal for the session today is to introduce you to interviewing, and we're taking an approach where we're both going to share advice and tips, mostly for how to be more effective in an interview, but also if you're someone that interviews others, and this will happen as you progress through your career, you will be in a position to interview others. We want to make you more confident and prepared to be a successful interviewer as well. So we'll focus on both in-person and virtual interviewing because we really feel strongly that obviously if you're looking for work in the next year or so, or if you're looking for work internationally, so if you're in another country and you're looking for work in Canada or vice versa, this will be a format, video interviewing will be a format that I think is here to stay, regardless of when and if we can get together in person. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Remember that when you are invited for an interview, and we talked about this at the resume workshop, for those of you who were there, you're one of a handful of people that have been invited for an interview. There's not very many. So your resume and your cover letter have worked to attract the attention of the employer. And so when they invite you for an interview, they're on your side. They really want you to be successful in the interview because it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of time. And there's a lot of pressure for interviewers to bring on the right people for the jobs. So there's a lot of responsibility as an interviewer to find a successful candidate. So they're hoping you'll be the right candidate for the position. They want you to be able to present really well. They want you to showcase that you're qualified and that you're an excellent fit for their team. At the same time, you need to think about interviewing as it's a two-way street. So what that means is not only obviously are the interviewers assessing you for your skills, credentials, experience, and fit, but you also should be assessing that the interviewers. What kind of a company is this? Generally speaking, an interviewer will be somebody that you may be working for. So what's their personality like? Do you feel like you're developing some rapport with them? Do you feel like they're someone that you can work with? So while they're assessing you, keep in mind that you're assessing them. And most people are nervous for interviews. I would say that that's the normal state of affairs. When you go into an into an interview, you are usually have some nerves. So we're going to talk about ways to overcome those nerves. But I also want to let you know that the interviewer is often a little bit nervous. So because as I said, there's a lot of pressure on them to find the right fit. So in order to be successful, you really need to understand the process. You need to be able to identify what are the interviewer's objectives and be able to, you'll never know what the questions are, but there's a really easy way and strategic way for you to prepare. So when a job posting is put up, and you respond to it with a resume and cover letter, hopefully you've done what we've talked to you about in the first session, which is you've done some analysis. What does the employer need? You've highlighted with your marker the soft and hard skills, and that's how you're going to prepare for the interview as well. So you're going to identify the key skills that the employer is looking for, and you're going to prepare stories to share. The other thing I want to mention is that there's a number of different styles of interviewing. There's a number of different types of interview questions or types of interviews that you really want to be prepared for. And we're going to talk briefly about all of those. So some of you will have done interviewing in the past. So there's no rights or wrongs, right? It's a highly subjective process. But we value your expertise, we value your opinions, we value your experiences. So feel free to share them with your peers here today. So we're going to start with a poll. The poll really is around Interviewing takes practice, but most of us don't practice for interviewing. How many times have you sat and practiced for an interview? Like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So I want to ask in a poll, how many of you have had between 5 and 10 different job interviews? So Katie, can you launch a poll?
Sadly, no. I'm not
Oh,
sure why I don't have full control this morning, even though I'm co-host.
okay. So let me see if I can launch it. And sadly, no, I can't. So we won't do a poll, but we will do a straw poll by asking you to raise your hands. You guys will see my dog in the background wandering back and forth. This is the realities of working from home. He's gone. You may never see him again for the rest of the day. So can we have a show of hands for people who have their screens on? How many people have had between 5 and 10 different interviews in their lifetime? Okay, quite a few. The screen keeps moving, so I can't really tell. Oh, good. I like the raise hands. Very good. You guys, you know what you're doing. Okay, that's great. Okay, and then how many people have had more than 10 interviews in their lives? Okay, so you can see it's very, very few people. Can I ask everybody to lower the hands? And I'm going to ask one more question. And I'm looking over here because you guys are over here. My slides are over here. Mohammed, if you lower your hand, that would be great. How many of you have had the job of interviewing candidates to bring on into your organization? Okay, so again, quite a few. Do you like doing it? I see some people doing this. Oh, Alame says yes, she likes doing it. Okay. Yeah, most people are kind of lukewarm about it, again, because it's a lot of pressure, right? And typically the other thing too is that when you're asked to bring on new candidates to your team or to your organization, nobody's taking away the work that you usually have. So it's quite time intensive and takes a lot of work to interview candidates. Okay, so I'm going to quickly fly through this. This is basically our agenda for today. So we're going to start with
Kelly,
basically, yes?
I'm not seeing your screen if
Oh,
you've started sharing.
oh, geez. I had a beautiful screen on our last one too. This is why you co-host. You guys should have told me that.
There you go.
Okay, perfect. So from 8 to 10:15, we're gonna be in a seminar. So we're gonna do some. We were gonna do some polling, which we tested yesterday and worked fine. We're gonna do some polling. We're gonna do some individual exercises, and we're gonna do some work together in groups in breakout rooms. But the basic sort of breakdown of our seminar today is how do you prep for an interview, tips for during the interview, and then what to do after the interview. Then we're going to take a 15-minute break. And then we're going to reconvene for an hour and 15 minutes, and we're going to do mock interviews with business guests. So we've got 9 business guests that have come in, and they're going to ask you some common interview questions. You're going to be together as in teams. I'll talk more about that at the end of the interview, but basically don't panic. They know you haven't had a chance to practice. They know that you don't know anything about them or their organization. It's just about giving you some practice, and it's kind of fun. Okay. So here's our course objectives. We're going to figure out how to develop effective responses to standard interview questions. We're going to learn how to establish a professional presence in the interview, understand how to strategically prepare responses to interview questions. So that's the preparation piece. Know how to concisely and effectively answer BDI questions or behavior-based questions or competency-based questions. These are all the same terms for sort of the same type of question, which is the most common interview question that you will face. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how to excel as both an interviewer and a candidate. Okay. So what are the keys to a successful interview? I think the first step is really understanding yourself by taking time for self-reflection. So you need to be able to describe yourself in a way that's factual, specific, and businesslike. Like you to think back a little bit on the key insights that you learned from the career leader assessment in seminar one. So that really helped to identify some of your unique strengths, interests, skills, motivations. So these are things that you should have and be self-aware of as you progress into an interview portion of the recruitment process. Understanding where your strengths are and where you can add value, and also understanding the marketplace, industries and sectors where you can contribute, combined with what you want, what you're looking for, what are your ideal terms of employment, will help you to set strategic targets for yourself. So this is really important. If you go into an interview and you're not self-aware and you don't know what value you can offer to an employer, and you or alternately you can't articulate what value you can offer to an employer, you may not be as successful in the interview as you should be. So that's one of the things that we're going to talk to you about today. The other thing is the resume is your marketing tool that got you invited to the interview. So you need to pat yourself on the back and say, look, I did an excellent job on this. I'm one of a handful of people that have been invited to this interview. But you really have to understand your resume. So especially when you've had some help getting it to the position where it is now. So, the career development consultants have helped you and worked on things and kind of massaged some stuff. Make sure that everything that's been suggested to you, you feel really comfortable about on your resume, because at the end of the day, you need to be able to address in detail every single piece of your resume. So whether it's an accomplishment statement that you've identified, they may ask you to tell them more about that. Right. So you need to be able to talk and tell them a story about a time you did that, whatever that bullet point was that's on your resume. You also need to be able to support any educational credentials that you've put on your resume, and explain what was the value of that to you. So be sure you study your resume and be able to answer any questions. And then, oh, sorry, I'll keep moving here. So understand the job and the skills required for the position is the second step. So I've talked about this already at the beginning. Really important to analyze the job and understand what is the employer looking for? What are the key skills, credentials, et cetera, and be able to articulate those in an interview. The other piece is to research the company or the organization. This is the number one complaint from employers to us at the Career Development Center, is that students didn't clearly understand what the organization did or what the role was. So it's really important, and I think this is less common at the graduate student level than it is at the undergrad level, but it's really, and especially if you're an international student and you're applying for jobs in Canada, knowing the labor market, understanding the companies that are recruiting and what they do, is going to be a little bit more work for you, because they're not name brand companies necessarily, and they're not companies that you've grown up knowing about. So it's really important to research the company and the organization. And then finally, we're going to talk about this till we're blue in the face. Make sure that you have accomplishment stories, personal stories of times that you've been able to demonstrate the skill sets that the employer is looking for. And you've identified those skill sets from the job posting and from your research. That can also be helpful in terms of identifying what the organizational culture is and what their values are, so you can align with that. Okay, moving along here. So I want to talk to you just briefly about different interview formats. Some of you will have experienced some of these. Some of you will experience many of them. Probably the best practice format is called a panel interview. So that means that there's more than one person interviewing you. So there might be 2, 3, 4. Definitely will happen for sure at large organizations. Government positions will all be panel interviews. And they're designed so that there's not a particular bias on the part of the interviewer to potentially bring people on board who are very much like them. Right. So it's important to have a variety of personalities, skill sets, in your organization to be able to capitalize on that as a team. So a panel will allow different people to have insights into what credentials and the kind of fit that you will bring to their organization. It's a panel interview also creates more internal support. So if more than one person has decided that you're the right candidate for the position, then already you have some built-in support, emotional and support, psychological support for your onboarding. So it's often allows an individual to come on board in a team or an organization with built-in mentors and with more buy-in. So that's another reason. One of the things that students, that candidates do, that can be a mistake with a panel interview, is to talk in the panel interview about how nervous you are because you're meeting with more than one person. So don't do that. That's a tip I would offer to you. Again, I'm going back to everybody's nervous. So telling somebody you're nervous just reinforces that you're the same as everybody else. I'll also throw back to our first seminar where I talked about the fact that enthusiasm and confidence are the number one and number two reasons that people are hired. So even though you may be nervous, you need to act confidently, and everyone can do that. And if we had more time here, we'd talk about the voice of the imposter, which is that little voice in the back of your head that's telling you you're not good enough. You need to quiet that voice and just recognize again that you're one of a handful of people that have been invited. So obviously they think you have the credentials to be able to do the job. So build on that and go in with some confidence. Despite the fact that panel interviews have been encouraged and are definitely best practices in terms of interviewing, over 50% of interviews still particularly with small and medium-sized companies, are done one-on-one. So how many people have had a one-on-one interview in the past? Raise hands. I'm looking over here. Okay, so lots, you can see. Yeah. So um, the good news is it's easy. It's much easier in a one-on-one to try to build rapport with one person. Um, it's oftentimes it's just easier to connect with one person. So, but if you're an interviewer, I'm going to ask that you please never do this. It's really important for both the candidate and your selection process to have another person's opinion. And it's also from an HR perspective, it just provides safety for both the interviewer and the interviewee. So try not to do a one-on-one if you can. If we're in person, of course, some of the things that we're going to talk about, actually, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to keep moving. Katie will cover it later. On the spot interviews, has anyone had one of these? Maybe you're at a networking event, a dinner meeting, you're at a career fair, and all of a sudden you start getting asked questions that you're going, hey, wait a minute, this feels like an interview. Doesn't happen it's not super common, but one of the things that we really want you guys to do and practice over the course of these career seminars, and we'll work on this more in seminar 3, is develop an elevator pitch. So it's just a really concise, factual, clear way of sort of introducing yourself or sharing with somebody in a minute, 2 minutes, what's your area of expertise? How do you want to be branded in the market? What's your credentials? What are your top skills? So we're going to do that in seminar 3, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it anyway, just to remind you that this can happen. There's also something called an approval or fit interview. And so basically that often will happen after you've gone through maybe a screening interview with the HR person, then you've come in and met with the manager and maybe a couple of other people from the team. And now they've invited you to maybe a third interview. Sometimes it'll be over coffee. Sometimes they may invite you for a meal, maybe to meet the team in a more casual setting, or to meet maybe a senior level person who has the final approval on whether you're hired or not. So it might be the president of the company. It might be the vice president of the department that you're hoping to work for. But the key here is that this is typically, you've passed all of the hurdles, really, and this is finally just about personality fit. So are you going to fit in with the organizational culture? Are you going to fit in with the team? Or are you going to be someone that they want to come to work with? So I want to, we're going to talk again in seminar 3. We're going to do a business etiquette, dining etiquette piece in that seminar because we want everyone to feel really confident of their um, dining and etiquette skills during a meal. But the one thing I get asked a lot is, I've been invited to this coffee or I've been invited to this dinner. It's the third stage in my interview process. Should I pay? So I want to tell you right now, if it's a business situation and you've been invited to join them, that they pay. So that's the etiquette. So don't argue over paying, don't even offer to pay if it's an interview situation. It's up to the company and the individual who's invited you to pay. Okay, one more, here we go. I think I have to move a little faster. I'm trying to use my keyboard and I have to use my mouse. Okay, so finally, phone and video interviews. Telephone interviews are often used for first interviews and they're generally just screening interviews. So you might get the HR person just asking you a series of questions to see if you have the skill sets or the ability to, the credentials that they're looking for to move you to an in-person interview, maybe in their organization. Or I think, as I've said, more commonly video interview will be coming up. So that's generally it. For the most part, you won't have a decision-making interview over the phone. They will move to video conferencing or they will move to in-person. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie now, who hopefully will go faster than me because otherwise we're going to run out of time.
So another common interview format is a follow-up interview. So this would be a second interview, a third interview. These are particularly common at the mid to senior level. You're going to want to make sure that you're developing additional STAR stories. We're going to talk about that in a bit, but make sure that you're developing additional stories, go more in depth to what you've done before, find new things to talk about, etc., to make sure that you're really giving them as much of a rounded out picture of your professionalism as possible. I'm just going to load up the next 3. So slightly less common are these next ones. So a technical interview could actually be part of your first interview. This is going to be to assess your level of technical competency, as you can probably guess from the name. You could be asked to perform a technical task or describe how you would use a technical skill to solve a problem. It could include writing a piece for a communications job, programming some code, or showing your proficiency with an Excel spreadsheet, giving a presentation for a role that involves lots of speaking engagements, etc. Case interviews are really the core of the selection process for consultants and people involved in consulting. In this, the candidate, you, would be presented with a problematic business scenario that you then have to analyze and propose a solution to. The key competencies here that recruiters are looking for are business acumen, structure and problem solving. They want to see the approach that you take to solving a problem, how analytical and creative your thinking is. They could be looking for math skills, how you use data to make recommendations, communication skills, etc. And a group interview is kind of a little bit of what you'll be doing later today. So this is where, sort of, group interviews traditionally are a group of candidates working together to perform an activity. Candidates are going to be assessed based on your individual contributions to the exercise. Some of the keys to success in a group interview: if possible, take the lead. But more than anything, be calm, be assertive but not aggressive. Make sure that you're including others, show that you work well on a team, and keep an eye on the time and stay focused on the overall objective. Next up. So can you put in the chat, how do you prepare for an interview? What's your process? What do you do?
Yeah, this is where you get to share your expertise. And Nicole, if you could sort of start sharing some of those, that would be great.
So we've got Google the company and the position, reading the job description.
Sorry, Katie.
No, that's all right. That's all right. I can do this. Read the job description carefully. Again, researching the role, study the organization and the skills that are desired, looking for the competencies. Google common interview questions and prepare answers. Study the job and the company. Research people with the same position on LinkedIn. Look up the interviewer and others within the corporation.
Excellent.
On LinkedIn, learn about the team. Check Glassdoor and other forums. These are some really great suggestions here. Know the company's values. Try to find other candidates from the same company and learn about their experience.
Katie, I don't know if you saw it up here, but someone said mock interview, which is also a great option.
Oh, I missed that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Understand the importance of the position offered and accordingly develop a mindset to drive the interview. Contact existing employees. So yeah, these are some, yeah, sleep well. Good, Kelvin. Yes. Sleep well the night before. These are some good suggestions here. News articles, successes and challenges. Exactly. Yeah, you guys have some really great suggestions here. So just in the interest of time, thank you so much for all of those. You're gonna see a lot of what you said coming up on this upcoming slide here. So as Kelly's kind of already said, understand where you can add value and what sets you apart from other candidates. So what is it that you bring to this role as opposed to a different candidate? We've already seen this one. This is one that didn't come up in the chat. If possible, request the full job description, because sometimes what you see is much shorter than the complete job description.
Yeah, this is especially true of government jobs. So they often have 4 pages of job description, but will only put like a short paragraph or even nothing.
Yeah. We saw some of this show up in the chat already, using your network to gain valuable information from someone already working in the industry. We've seen this one as well. One thing that I did when I prepared for my interview with Asper was I read the strategic plan as listed on the website. I identified some of the key values that had been pulled out in that were going to shape the next 5 years of Asper. And because I had a video interview, like many of you will, I actually put them on a sticky note just on the side of my screen where they couldn't see them to remind myself to use those words throughout the interview because those values align with my own values. So that's one of the benefits. We'll get into that a little bit more, but that's one of the benefits of being able to do a video interview, is to be able to subtly leave yourself cues. Sorry,
while you're flipping, can I just add something?
Yeah, please.
One of the key tips that I think is really valuable is when somebody phones you to organize the interview. It's generally speaking, it likely isn't the manager who's going to be interviewing you that phones you, although it could be. But one of the things that I suggest to candidates is ask who will be conducting the interview, because then hopefully if they've determined the process, they'll be able to tell you that there's 3 people that will be interviewing you. And then you can say, oh, could I have their names and their titles, please? So you'll learn who they are, like what their name is, and you know, who is the decision maker, right? So if there's a person who's an HR manager, if you're applying for a marketing job, there's a person who's an HR manager, they're there to support the process. But if the marketing manager is there, you know that that's the primary decision maker. And you've got their name and the name of all the people in it. So when you actually do get to the interview, you'll be able to and are introduced quickly to all the 3 people. You'll have a pre-understanding and you'll be able to potentially use their names, which helps to create rapport in the interview. So just a quick tip.
Yep. Thanks, Kelly. Those are really good things to do as well. So sorry, I'm umming a lot because I'm looking at the time and I know that we need to be a little bit faster. I'm trying to figure out what I can shorten up maybe a little bit. In terms of that first point there, we've already addressed that in the chat, but for the people who are doing the interview, if you are the interviewer as opposed to the interviewee, remember to go back to the highlighted skills. I know interviewers don't always highlight their own job posting, but it's a good idea for interviewers, and make sure that you are using those to create your interview questions. For interviewees, We want you to develop, we want you. It's a good practice to develop 10 to 12 accomplishment stories. We're going to get into SAR again, but 10 to 12 because that will help you be as prepared as possible. And these are going to be based on, again, those highlights that you did in the job posting while you were creating your resume and your cover letter. Think about the key points that you want to make sure you get across. What are your main strengths? What are your main things that connect you to this job? Have a brief outline of that. Even if you don't have it around you, having created that will help you create focus in the interview as well. Prepare 3 to 5 questions for the interviewer. So those could be things like, describe a typical day for the person in this role, or what are the priorities of this position? Somebody pointed out, do your research on the company and Google them. So doing my research, I noticed this. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? What do you like most about working for this organization? Do you have any concerns about my ability to perform well in this role? Could give you a chance to address anything that maybe didn't come through in the interview already, or if you maybe misspoke or something. It just is a nice touch point. And always, what are the next steps if they haven't already identified them? And would you like a copy of my references? This is another really important one to do, just again, to help kind of create that focus as you're getting ready to do the interview, is write down 3 reasons why you are interested in this role and 3 reasons why they should choose you. And if you can't come up with 3 for either of those, this might not be the job for you. And that can be okay as well. Make sure that you're really, as part of all of this, conveying your interest and your passion at the end of the interview. So, making sure that you're reiterating that you're really interested in this job and very excited about this opportunity, etc. All right, we are going to jump over to a video quickly just to break up hearing our voice all the time. We just get the right screen open here.
Meet Anya, a recent grad majoring in business administration. She's interviewing for an entry-level project management position. Note her posture: head up, shoulders pulled back, no slouching, and no laid backness. The interview begins the minute you walk into the building. Anya treats everyone in the office with respect while keeping eye contact. From security personnel to receptionists, anyone you run into on your way in could be asked to give feedback on you. It's normal to be nervous. When nerves kick in, the natural human response is to take short breaths and breathe faster. Stay calm by taking a deep breath before entering. Hold it, count to 3, and then slowly breathe out. Pause. First, ace those introductions. Greet everyone in a way that is authentic to you, like, hey, nice to meet you, and then say their name. That one always works. You're more likely to remember their name if you say it out loud when you first meet. A lot of the time, small talk comes up before any questions. It's good to have a few current events or topics in mind. You can't possibly predict what they're gonna ask, but you can practice answering the common ones, like, why do you wanna work here? What makes you unique? Let's see what our interviewer asks.
So I want to hear more. Tell me a little about your experience and what you'd bring to this role.
Pause. When this is asked, they're looking to learn what makes you stand out. Be honest with your answers. That means having to pause and think for a second. That is all right. Think about your past experiences and how the role lines up with your future goals. It never hurts to be honest.
Great question. Ever since I was young, I've always been the organized one in my family. Whether it was helping my parents schedule vacations or color coordinating my closet, naturally that lifestyle got me here, project management. I've been a people person for as long as I can remember. Plain and simple, I love team building and making sure everyone has a part. Just the other month.
Oh, just really quick, don't speak negatively about previous places you've worked. Instead, talk about what you've learned.
I helped lead a team of 5 to deliver a 3-week sales project a few days ahead of schedule. I'd love to bring these things here.
Perfect. A response like this not only answers the question, but also shows off her personality. But remember, there's no one right way to interview and answer questions. Be yourself and let your personality shine. Be aware of your movements. Practice polite, confident body language. Subtly miming your interviewer's posture can actually create a sense of connection. Of all places, unnecessary movements are hard to ignore in an interview. Whether it's tapping your fingers or bouncing your leg, be aware and stay present.
Hey, it's been great chatting so far. I guess my last question is, do you have any questions for me?
Ooh, this is a hot one. Make sure to have a short list of questions for your employer in your back pocket. Ask the questions you would if you got the job. If tomorrow was your first day, what would you want to know from the manager? Even if you don't have any burning questions, asking a few shows that you did your homework and that you really care. Some include, what do you like best about working here? What are some mistakes people have made in this position? What is a goal you're currently working toward? How will my performance be evaluated?
Well, I did read that you're expanding your software team next quarter. I'm curious how you plan to carry that out.
The interview isn't actually over. Always follow up within 24 hours with a thank you email to the hiring manager. This can be a quick note simply thanking them for their time, or a longer one that elaborates on some of the things you talked about. It's key to leaving a lasting impression. This was the breakdown of an interview.
All right, Kelly, if I can get you to share your screen again.
Will do.
Well, I move over to my notes. Okay. So now we are, oh, this isn't the slide that we're on. Oh, where did we go there?
We're going backwards.
There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. So, sorry, folks. So we've talked a little bit about the interview itself. What about before the interview in terms of the logistics of it? So you want to make sure if it is an in-person interview, where is it? Where is the physical building? If it is a company like Manitoba Hydro or some others, they have multiple buildings. Make sure that you're going to the right one. If possible, plan out even where the office is, if you can figure out what floor it is, etc. If you take the bus, make sure that you're planning your route accordingly and carefully. And I would recommend looking up a coffee shop nearby so that you can arrive early, but not to the actual location. Missing a bus, or a bus is full and didn't let you on, etc. That's not something that you want to do. Being late to your interview is a terrible first impression. So use the coffee shop tip. Best practice is to show up to the office about 10 minutes before the interview itself. So use that coffee shop. If you're driving, make sure that you're planning your route, plan for trains or construction. Where are you going to park? How long of a walk is it going to be? What's the weather like, etc. You might also want to take advantage of the local coffee shop. If it is virtual, make sure that you have a quiet professional space with good lighting, that you've got a good webcam, that you've got a mic either in the webcam, or maybe you need a separate mic because this one isn't strong enough. As we talked about earlier, feel free to put some sticky notes up around the edges of your monitor, but it needs to be subtle. Never give the impression that you are reading during your interview. This needs to be a conversation. So use your sticky notes sparingly. As somebody said, are you rested? Have you eaten? How are you feeling today? Make sure that you are building enough space into your day so that you can arrive as calm and prepared as possible. We've talked a little bit about using deep breathing to keep yourself collected. That's a really great tip. Here we've got taking a portfolio with you. So that's not like a draft portfolio, but this is a binder that you bring with you that has all of these things in it. So you want to have a copy of your resume, a copy of your references that are formatted in the same way as your resume and your cover letter to continue with that brand, that personal brand. You want to have notes for last minute review. So things that you twigged while you were doing your prep. questions for the interviewer. This is where you would put the names of those interviewing you, so you don't have to worry about potentially forgetting them when nerves inevitably hit. Bring a contact. Ask when they're setting up the interview, ask for contact information in case of emergency, or if you're doing a video interview and the internet connection stops working. So make sure that you've got a contact, something other than just email to get in touch with folks. I also bring a note, paper, and pen, and do what Kelly did earlier. She identified to you that her notes are on a different screen, so she's going to be looking over here eventually. If you've got Notepad in front of you, make sure that you tell them, I have a Notepad in front of me, and just as we're talking for the interview, I might make a couple of notes to remind myself of things that I want to make sure I'm addressing in my responses to your question. And I believe we have, oh, for some reason, one of the last points didn't show up, and that is visualize yourself doing well. I think many of us have heard that, you know, professional athletes visualize themselves doing the race, and that actually helps them have a better race. So visualize yourself doing this interview well, and you will have a better interview.
Great, thanks, Katie. Okay, so we're going to talk quickly about the main types of interview questions. We're going to go over and review responses to common interview questions, but someone mentioned that in the chat. Skilled practitioners will do a combination of different types of interview questions. So they will likely start with some common interview questions, and they may move into some situational questions. They definitely will use behavior-based questions for sure. So the other piece is that there's different types of interviews, which we've already talked about, but I want to talk about structured interviews, which is most common with larger organizations, organizations that have really strong HR practices in place, definitely government. Post-secondary institutions will use very structured interview process where there's pre-established questions and they never deviate from them. So they ask the same questions to each candidate to make sure that there's no unfairness that might happen by asking further probing questions or by not having that structure. Then there's unstructured interviews where this is typical of what we just saw in the video, potentially, and often happens with one-on-one interviews. And so it's more free-flowing. It's more of a conversational style of interview. And this can happen when your interviewer is not either prepared or is not skilled at interviewing. But don't be fooled, because there are some very, very skillful interviewers that use this type of interview approach. And it's basically to get more information about who you are as a person and to assess fit. So usually you'll do most of the talking in an unstructured interview. So common interview questions sound like this. Tell me about yourself. What are your salary expectations? What are your strengths and weaknesses? You know, they were addressed as well in the interview or in the video that you saw. Situational questions. I'll just move to my next. Katie, you could do it if I forget to do it. Situational or scenario-based questions are really designed around specific examples of situations that you may face on the job. And how they differ from behavior-based questions is that behavior-based questions are based on actual experiences that you have had in your past, whereas situational questions, they could ask you things that maybe you've never encountered before, but what they're assessing is how you would react or how you would act in that situation. So things like an example might be you disagree with the way your supervisor says to handle a problem. So you may never have had that situation, but the question is, what would you do? So they're asking you how you would react to that type of situation. The next type of question that you will face for sure is behavior descriptive questions. So basically these are opportunities for you to actually tell stories about things that you have done in your past. Katie's going to talk a little bit more in detail about behavior descriptive questions, but they sound like this. Tell me about a time when you had to use your political savvy to advance a controversial project. Case and technical questions. I think Katie has already covered those. So, you'll be asked a specific business problem in a case and asked to solve it. Usually you're given anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour. And what you want to do there is you want to showcase your problem solving and how you are getting to a solution and how you are analyzing the problem. Technical questions are very specific around your technical competencies. So, and it might be testing. So for instance, if you are applying for a teacher, they may ask you to do a presentation, which tests your technical skills, right? Or if you're applying as a programmer, they may ask you something like, what coding language are you most comfortable with? So briefly, I want to talk a little bit about illegal and inappropriate questions. And this is one of the reasons that it's important to have two people in an interview. And you saw in our video that we shared, that was a one-on-one interview. But typically, employers are not permitted to ask questions in Canada about subjects, including, the following that are on your slide. The Human Rights Code is a provincial law that protects individuals and groups from discrimination in Canada. So basically, discrimination is defined as treating a person differently to their disadvantage and without reasonable cause on the basis of a protected characteristic. So the protected characteristics are Canadian-wide, and their characteristics include ancestry, so color and or perceived race, nationality, or national origin, religion or creed, ethnic background or origin, age, sex, including pregnancy, so you can't discriminate against someone because they're pregnant, gender identity, sexual orientation, marital or family status, source of income, political beliefs, physical or mental disabilities, and social disadvantages. So as somebody who's being interviewed, you should know that these are areas that you have protection under Canadian law and Manitoba law. And as an employer, you need to know that you should not, as an interviewer, you should not be asking questions that have anything or touch on any of these protected characteristics. So, do you ever get asked any of these kinds of questions? The answer is yes. So there's different ways to handle these kinds of questions. And oftentimes it's not an ill intent on the part of the interviewer. It's just a lack of knowledge. So it's very common for someone to ask you, where are you originally from? Okay, so that can be just an unintended question just to build rapport. But in fact, it could be interpreted as touching on the ethnicity or nationality piece. So you need, as a candidate, you need to determine how you're going to handle those kinds of questions before you go in. So a couple of questions that I've heard of is that one that I've just mentioned. The other one is, do you have children? So, you may want to deflect a little bit and answer in some of these ways. I'm not sure of the relevance of that question to the role. Can you tell me how it relates specifically to the job? You could say, I do have children. You could preface with this and then say, I do have children, but if you're worried about whether I can work overtime, or you're worried about whether I have childcare in place in case of illnesses, I do. But in fact, you don't even have to answer that question. You can just go to the I would prefer to answer questions directly related to the position. Okay. The other thing is you can make it a win-win. So if somebody asks you where you're originally from, you can tell them, and then you can spin that so that it actually is a win-win for both parties by saying, I have international experience and I speak multiple languages. And so I think that will add value to this role in terms of my ability to interact with a diverse client group, something like that. So what I would say is we briefly talked about that, but if you have any other questions, please feel free to talk to us, offline about those kinds of things. We're happy to help sort of navigate the process, but be prepared to deflect those questions.
Kelly?
It's actually a really good question in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, I was just getting to that, Katie. Thank you.
Yeah, if we don't find these questions unfriendly, can we answer them?
Absolutely. Yeah. For sure. And, I have been so guilty of the where are you from? For sure. And again, and that's why I said it's not necessarily intended negatively. It's it's oftentimes intended positively to build rapport and gain a better understanding of the person you're meeting with. It might not even be in a candidate situation. And for me, I've lived internationally. So oftentimes, you know, I'm asking the question because I think that there could be some commonality there, some common ground. And so, I'm wanting to share and discuss that. But no, for sure, if you feel comfortable answering the question, that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about basically, we're going to give you a list of common interview questions. Somebody had said in the chat, Google common interview questions. I think that that's an okay strategy. And we're going to talk about the fact that we really want you to be prepared for the common interview questions, and that it's a great mental checklist before you go in. Don't don't Google questions that like if you're going for a business analyst role, don't Google interview questions for business analysts, because you'll get hundreds. And so the more strategic way is to look at what are the competencies identified in the job posting, and then build responses to those competencies. Because it doesn't matter what the question is, if they're doing a good job in designing the interview questions, they're going to be asking you to share with them the key skills they need for people to be successful in that role. So better to do that. I do think there's nothing wrong with that suggestion. I just don't want you going down the rabbit hole and preparing really complex answers to hundreds of questions, because that could take you forever to get ready. So definitely prepare for common interview questions. So I'm going to bring them all up here because I've highlighted them because I want to kind of talk about them in pieces. So the tell me about yourself is often the first question you'll get asked in an interview. It's a great way to provide a professional summary of who you are and what you bring to the role. So as part of the tell me about yourself, you're going to probably do a bit of a career review. You're going to tell them obviously what you've done. Now, I'm going to suggest that when you do that career review, you do be specific about your titles and your businesses that you've worked at. If the business is not a household name, give them a little spiel about what are the products or services or the industry sector that workplace is in, and what your role was there. And then some accomplishments in there. And those accomplishments will also lead to some of your strengths. So the tell me about yourself is probably the longest question you're going to answer. It's probably 1.5 to 3 minutes long. And basically, as I've said, it's about you professionally. So it's your area of expertise, your scope and level of experience. If you're changing careers, um, I would talk about potentially what courses you're taking in the MBA. You definitely want to leverage your MBA to talk about how that's enhancing your skill sets as it relates to the position. Key accomplishments, key achievements in roles. Definitely want to talk about your soft skills. So that can often be, again, aligned to your strengths. It's very similar to what your profile does in your resume. So the tips I would say is that sometimes people talk too much about things that aren't professional. So they go first to that. Uh, for instance, I brought you into the video conference, or I brought you into my office and introduced you to the people who will be interviewing with you. We've had a bit of chit chat before the formal interview portion starts. And then I ask, tell me about yourself, and you tell me what your name is. That's redundant. So I'm going to tell you now in the mock interviews, please don't tell me what your name is, because I already know what your name is. Where I want you to go here is about yourself professionally. The other piece is, don't tell me where you were born unless it's relevant. Don't tell me how many dogs you have. So it's really about focusing on being specific, factual, and businesslike about yourself. So it's a big one. And we're going to do some exercise to try to develop it, because you will be, I'm going to tell you, you will be asked that question in the mock interviews with the business guests coming up. So I want you to take that exercise seriously and write a tell me about yourself when we get to it. The tell me about yourself can also be used as the basis for your elevator pitch. So it's really important. If you include your strengths in the elevator pitch, or sorry, in the tell me about yourself, they need to be short and snappy. Okay, so something like, if you have strong client service skills, you might want to say, that means I listen to identify my clients' needs, and then I work to exceed them. This has resulted in me being a client service champion, recognized by my employer for the last 3 years. So something very short and snappy like that. Okay, the change of career leaving story. Why are you looking for a new job? Why are you leaving your previous employer? Why are you changing your career at this point? So if you've been an engineer and now you're looking for a finance role, you should be prepared to answer that question. Where do you want to be in 5 years? That's a common question. And think about it in a way that's strategic and productive. So if you're changing careers, you might want to say, I expect to spend the next 3 years really learning my new field and becoming as strong and as competent as possible in this role. What I often hear is, I want to be where you're sitting. So depending on the interviewer, that may or may not resonate well. And then last is the why should we hire you? And this is often the last question that you're asked before the end of the interview. And so what you want to do here is, this is an opportunity to recap why you're a really good person for this job. What are your key skills, credentials that align with what the employer is looking for? What are your credentials? And then last but not least, to really reiterate that you're interested in this position. So after meeting with you and your members of your team, I'm even more interested in this opportunity, and I really think that my skills align well with the role. So there you go.
Kelly?
Yep.
There was a question in the chat about if you can talk about your hobbies or interests in a couple sentences in the tell me about yourself.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And remember, in the video, they said, let your personality shine. So, and we've got a template that I'm going to ask you to pull out right now. It's using our handout 3, which is tell me about yourself responses to common interview questions. So it's at the back of the package that we gave you. And I'm going to ask you to spend a few minutes creating a tell me about yourself after I talk about the next slide. But at the end, I often will share something that's interesting about that I think is unique or interesting about myself. So for sure, but it has to be interesting, right? And if possible, if it aligns at all to the job, that's great. Because they do want to know, about you.
You are getting a few more questions in the chat. Do you want to open those, or do you want me to read them to you?
No, read them to me.
Okay. If we tell the interviewer our long-term goals, and let's say it's owning a business, will this reflect in a bad way, showing we might quit the role down the road?
I think you need to handle that question in a way that's pretty strategic. So I don't think employers expect you to stay with them forever anymore. I mean, average now is like 3 years in a job. So as long as you say, as long as you link it to the fact that the role that you're applying for now, you're going to be learning competencies and skill sets that, for your long-term goal, and you can say 10, 15 years down the road, I'm quite interested in potentially starting my own business. And then you can talk about, your entrepreneurial bent or attribute being an asset to the role. Does that make sense? So you link back that whatever it is going to be an asset to the role.
One last one, Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
How should we address the question, why do you want to leave your current employer?
I think always with that, it's about new opportunities for growth. You're never going to talk negatively about the situation at your at your at your current job. So, and oftentimes when people leave, it's because something isn't being fulfilled for them. So where you want to focus on, is this a new opportunity for growth? And you can even leverage in your MBA at that point. You can say, I'm looking for an opportunity to continue to grow in this field, new challenges, new opportunities, that kind of focus. Are we done?
Yes, you are. Thank you.
Okay. So last but not least, a very common question is the weakness question. So basically, it's often couched in different, they typically won't say what is your weaknesses, although they might. But, you know, like one of the ways that I say it is, you know, if you could change anything about yourself, what would you change? That's an interesting way to approach the weakness question. The other one is, you know, everyone has areas for self-development. Would you share with us an area that you've identified that you're trying to improve upon? So basically what you want to do is you want to follow the WAR approach, which is actually in your MBA interview guide in more details, but you want to pick an attribute and you want to be prepared for this. So think about, be honest, do some self-reflection. What is an area that you're interested in improving upon? Everyone has weaknesses. So when you are willing to share a weakness with an employer, it shows that you have that self-awareness and that you're also humble enough and you're willing to share, which is an important attribute. You're honest and you have integrity. So pick a weakness that isn't a deal breaker. So if you're applying for a finance job, don't tell them you're bad at numbers. Like that's a deal breaker. But for instance, you might say, you know, you are not a strong public speaker. You know, I've recognized early in my career that my nerves around public speaking could be a detriment to my career progression. So what I did was I joined Toastmasters, where I was a member for over 2 years and practiced my presentation skills. The result was that, you know, I'm much more confident, much more comfortable public speaking. Still don't love it, but I've now at the point where I don't feel it's going to be a detriment to my future career progress. So we follow the WAR approach is basically, so it's weakness, action, and then results. What did I learn? And 30 seconds or less in that response, only one. You only offer one of them.
Kelly,
Okay. Yeah.
sorry, I have another question in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
The why should we hire you question. This person had an interview at Google and was asked this. They had to wait for 10 hours in reception before they got a chance to be interviewed. They said they were not right in or calm mindset after such a long wait, but I bluntly said, I have the skills you were looking for. I got selected, but do interviewers appreciate such a straightforward response?
Well, they got selected, so I'm thinking they did appreciate. Remember, like I can't speak on every interviewer because it's very subjective process. But again, you know, I have the skills you're looking for, is a very short and blunt way to reiterate and recap what your credentials are for the job. But obviously, it worked for that employer, right? So again, for me, it's about reiterating the skills and strengths that you have for the job in a little bit more detail than that response. But it's not going to be more than a minute in response. Okay, so guys, we would like you to take your tell me about yourself guide. I should be able to pull it up and I don't have it. So I'm going to try to show it on my screen here, which won't work. Okay, it's in the package and it's called Tell Me a Bit About Yourself. It's at the back. It's not the very, very end one, but it's the third handout after the MBA guide. And I would like you to take 5 minutes just independently. And for those of you who are wondering, we're getting very close to a bio break. So hold on. Actually, we're going to take about 3 minutes. Sorry, we have to hurry. So tell me about 3 minutes to go over develop the introduction. So if you're looking at your sheet, it's your job title, who you are professionally, total amount of experience, courses you've taken, roles and responsibilities, area of expertise, and then maybe one strength. and what you mean by that strength. So take 3 minutes, we'll be very quiet, and jot down some answers to that. It's not going to be perfect, but it'll be a start. Okay, guys, about 30 seconds. Okay, guys. So wrap it up and we'll let Katie carry on.
All right, so I was going to say welcome back, but none of us went anywhere. So behavior descriptive interviewing, as we've talked about, is the most common and comprehensive format for interviewing. It is entirely based on the concept that the best predictor of your future performance is your past performance. So it's about measuring your real life experience instead of hypotheticals. And as we've discussed, the interview is really going to design questions based on the competencies in the job description to assess your ability to do the work. So we got another video. I will get that going.
Hey, my name is Evan. I'm a recruiter at Indeed. A behavioral interview is a technique that recruiters, like me, use to judge candidates based on their past behavior. Instead of asking hypothetical questions like, how would you react if you were under a lot of pressure at work? We might ask situational questions like, describe a time you were under a lot of pressure at work. How'd you react? A question I like to use is, tell me about a mistake that you've made. How'd you handle it? Success in a behavioral interview is all about preparation, so I recommend a process called the STAR method. With this method, you create a deliberate story arc that your interviewer can easily follow. Here's how it works. First, you start with the situation. What's the context of your story? Then add a task. What was your role in this situation? Next, share your action. What'd you do? And wrap it up with a result. What'd your actions lead to? Let's give it a try. Say you're in an interview and the recruiter asks, can you tell me about a challenging situation you overcame at work? Then you say, we're working on a 6-month contract for a high-value client when our agency merged with another larger firm. It was my role to lead the transition for my group while also communicating with our client to keep the project on track. I set up weekly check-ins with the client to update them on the progress of the merger. I also had regular one-on-ones with each person on the team to assess how they were handling the change. We ended up completing the project on time, meeting all their needs. It was really rewarding to navigate a lot of change and succeed under pressure. And you're done. See, that wasn't so hard. Practice is key. You won't be able to anticipate every question you get, but with a strong set of anecdotes, you'll be able to answer each one with confidence. Remember, they're interviewing you for a reason. You'll do great.
All right, Kelly, you can share your screen again. All right, so our friend there just used STAR. You might also hear SOAR, S-O-A-R. We're going to talk about STAR. It's all the same thing. It's all about telling a story. And it's important that you think about it as a story because stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And since you're the storyteller, you are the protagonist in your own story. So even though you might have been working on a team, use I language, talk about your role in it, feel like definitely highlight how you played in that, how well you played with your coworkers in that team setting, but use I language. Make sure that you're using strong action verbs as well. So you managed, you led, researched, analyzed, etc. And don't forget the results. And these, as much as possible, should align with the results that you also put into your cover letter and your resume. So quantify it as much as possible. If you don't have quantifiable results, talk about the things that you learned through that process or how things were improved because of the work that you did. So whether it was more effective communication, enhanced collaboration, whatever that result was. Oh yes, sorry, just consulting my notes. So we've talked about creating 10 to 12 stories. We mean it. I actually, for interviewing for this role, I typed them all up in Google Docs and I still have them handy for the next time I have an interview, which will never happen, Kelly.
What?
So never mind, I didn't say that. But it's actually really handy for me for this exercise, for these presentations. So do write them out as much as possible. All right, so now we're going to look at the fourth handout in your pack. It's on page 22, according to my PDF. So this is going to go over a little bit more about the BDI questions. As the slide says, you really are going to spend most of your time talking about the action, because that will give the interviewers the best insight into your process, your thinking, how you'll be in the workplace, etc. So we will start with, Kelly is going to ask me the question there, I believe. Do you have that up, Kelly? No?
Yes, I do. Sorry. It's basically the story that's on your spreadsheet, or sorry, on your sheet in your package. So describe a specific problem that you solved for your employer. And then Katie's going to just read it, and then we'll discuss it.
So there was a lack of appropriate and effective family support for Alzheimer's patients in chronic care due to inadequate family education. I initiated and organized a cross-functional committee of physicians, nurses, public health aides, and family stakeholders to review existing programming. I led committee meetings, developed agendas, and organized a research project to identify gaps in clinic and family support. I worked collaboratively within a team of healthcare professionals to create and implement a new community-based training program aimed at supplying critical information and support for family caregivers. My team and I delivered 36 sessions over an 18-month period, resulting in a greater understanding and engagement of families, reduced pressure on nurses and frontline aides to deliver sporadic information, and a 25% reduction in hospital stays for Alzheimer patients due to a streamlined and holistic approach of delivery of care.
Okay, so basically, I want to go back to what Katie had talked about. You can see in that example that there's lots of strong action verbs. So initiated, organized, created, implemented, worked collaboratively. So that's really what you want to focus on, is those key words. That's what the interviewer hears. And oftentimes those key words align with what they're looking for in the job posting. The other thing is Katie talked about the word I a lot. She used the word I in that example, and that's important because even though she was working with the team, she's not bringing the team to this job. She's bringing her skill sets, right? So that's really important. And then obviously the results are pretty clear. What I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about the value of this type of response to a question, because not only does it talk about let's go back to the question, describe a specific problem that you solved. So it's a question related to problem solving. So she shared an example that showcases her ability to solve problems, but you can see as well that there's so many other competencies that she's highlighted here. So stakeholder engagement, organizational skills, they be able to create, to work collaboratively within a team, to take the initiative, to solve problems. So those are just a few of the competencies she's highlighted that add value to her candidacy for this role. The other thing I wanted to mention, so we laughed when Katie said that she wrote them down and she still has them. And the piece that I want to focus on, not that she's kept them for another interview,
No.
but the piece that I want to focus on is that once you develop these SAR stories, you have them in your back pocket. They don't go away. So it's not like you spend all this time creating these stories, and then, once you've had your interview, you can use these for your next interview 3 years from now if you need to. The other piece is, that story was developed to showcase problem solving, but what if the question was, tell me about a time you engaged stakeholders for an effective result? You could use the same story, right? Or tell me about a time you organized um, a solution or something. So they're very versatile. And the other piece is, when you do these, when you begin to develop your SAR stories, and you should really have started to think about accomplishments while you were doing your resume, they will build confidence. So once you sit down and start to do these things, you'll start to feel confident about your ability to add value because they're powerful stories. So
that's a really good point, Kelly. And I just want to say one of the things that I actually did is I thought through the story that I've just developed can fit under these many different categories, so that I thought that through beforehand, so that when I was in the interview, I picked up on the leadership word and then I gave my leadership example. So that can be another way to really use the power of your strategic thinking to help you prep for an interview. The next thing that we want you to do is, again, using that sheet, we want you to develop a SAR story based on one of these competencies here on your screen, whichever one is what you feel is your strength, or the one that where the story comes to mind easiest, because we're not going to give you a lot of time. Again, you're going to have 4 to 5 minutes to prep this. So again, this is going to be independent work on your own, and do this because you will be using this for an example coming up after our break, which I believe is the next thing we do after this. Yes.
yes, and if the competency you want to focus us on isn't on this list, use whatever competency you want. Yeah. This was just to get your creative juices flowing and think about stuff. But think about a time where you've been able to achieve something in the workplace, and then write us a story. Situation, action, results. Okay, folks, we should all be coming back. Okay, now we're going to put you guys to work. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some mock interview practice with each other, with our peers. So the most important thing here is to practice what we've sort of talked about this morning. We're going to split you into groups of 3. There may be 4 in a group. You're going to have 20 minutes in total. So 5 minutes to get organized, and also to identify what is the competency that each one of you has developed a SAR story for. Then you're going to have 5 minutes for each person to be in a particular role. The role is, one person is going to be the interviewer. One person is going to be the candidate being interviewed. And 1 or 2, depending on how many people are in your room, are going to be the observer and take notes. So each person has 5 minutes in their role. Each one of you will be one of those 3 roles. So everyone will have a chance to be an interviewer, a candidate, and an observer. If you look at your mock interview practice forms that are in the package of materials we handed out, one of them is the observer form and one of them is the interviewer form. So the interviewer is going to start with tell me about yourself, and then in the first 5 minutes of being in your room, you're going to have told each other what your competency was, and you're going to together create a question related to that competency. So for instance, if the competency is teamwork, you know, the example here is this position involves a significant amount of teamwork. Tell me about a time you worked in a team that you're most proud of and what your own contribution was to the team. So if it's leadership, this position involves a significant amount of leadership. Tell me about a time when you used leadership to blah, blah, blah. So we're getting some practice here in developing BDI questions. So if you're an interviewer, you'll have an idea of how to develop them using the competency-based approach. And if you're a candidate, you can anticipate what type of question you'll be asked. So be constructive, be kind. This is an opportunity for you each to try to enhance the other's performance, right? So if there's something that the candidate isn't doing that you think should be done, so making more eye contact with the camera, you know, you forgot to tell us your results, so share with them so that everyone gets a little bit better. Anything to add, Katie, while I start putting people into breakout rooms?
Nothing really comes to mind. Just as Kelly said, be kind and be constructive. We'll also send out some reminders about the timing. to help us all keep on track.
Okay.
And enjoy it.
This is your chance to practice, so make the most of it. Okay, here you go. Katie and I may be dropping in, so don't worry about us if we drop in.
That your interviewer might have different levels of skill or knowledge of the job. So put yourself in the interviewer's shoes as much as possible, and also remember that Kelly, I need you to give me control of your screen. Also remember that the pressure of selecting a good candidate is massive. We've already talked about it, but let's put some numbers on it to put it into context. The cost of a bad hire is anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. So they really want to make sure that you're a good fit. And you want to make sure that you're a good fit as well. So be your best professional self in the interview. We've talked a little bit about the importance of being attentive, looking for cues. Are they starting to maybe look like your answers are a little too long, or are they giving you, really good reactions and they're looking for more information? Remember your body language, to use it throughout. So sitting up straight. If you're a hand talker, make sure that your hands are up on screen if that's natural for you. And remember that your first impression is important. You have 10 seconds to make a first impression, and 70% of people don't change their minds. There's also an image in your package on what you wish you'd known before your job interview. So definitely take a look at that. Always remember to turn off your phone, or at least just make sure that you don't have any sounds or vibrate on. Interviewing is a skill. We've taught, that's the whole reason why we're here. So be concise, but be specific. This is why practice is important. You can practice with us, you can practice with your friends, you can practice with whoever you want, but learning to be concise and specific is a really good skill. Keep in mind all of those things that we did beforehand, your outline, your strengths, etc. The interviewer will likely take notes, so there might be pauses while you are between the time when you're done answering a question and when they ask the next one. And that is just a natural part of the interview process. Ask for clarification, or if you're concerned that an answer didn't actually give the answer that they're looking for. So an example of that could be, did that answer your question, or is there anything else that you would like to know? You can also ask for clarification on a question. And as that one video said, it is okay when they ask a question to ask for a minute to collect your thoughts. Because you don't know the questions that they're going to ask. That's also a natural part of it. And always, always make sure that you are restating your interest in the job before the end of the interview. Just a little, remember that people skills are important. They're often called soft skills, and they're really about how you're going to fit onto a team. I think Kelly and I might be fighting for.
I just wanted to add, Katie, that, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just wanted to add that when Katie says to ask for a minute, she doesn't mean literally a minute. So in our business guest event, Interview Mania, after this, students will each only have 2 minutes. So if you take a minute to think about your response to the question, you better be pretty concise, because there's going to be timekeepers that will let you know that you have to move to the next student.
Yeah, definitely. So after the interview, we talked earlier about maybe scoping out a local coffee shop to go to beforehand. You might want to go there afterwards. Take notes. Think about, they will have told you what the next steps are. They might have given you some other important information that you need to know. Make sure that you're taking notes of that. And we'll get into some other stuff that you might want to do at the coffee shop in the next slide. Sending a thank you email is really important. It also will give a suggestion of how you might be in the workplace. So send it within 24 hours if possible. Remind them that you're keen on the job, maybe some of your skills. If you didn't answer a question during the session, you could possibly use this email as a chance if you thought of an answer since then. And follow up. They will have given you a timeline. If the timeline has passed, feel free to reach out to the interviewer and just ask, could you provide any more information? Are there any other things that you can do to help move the process along? But wait until the timeline has passed. Oh, I'm moving the slides on the wrong part of my screen. So let's go back here. So at the coffee shop afterwards, think about the fact that you're also interviewing this company. So now that you've talked to them in person, is this a place that you're interested in working for? Is this a role that you're interested in having? If you got to go in person, is the work environment a great fit for you? If it was virtual and you asked questions about how they're going to be doing virtual onboarding and what their virtual workplace is like, does that work for you? It's really important to be honest with yourself. Did the interviewer put you at ease? That could be an indication of what that workplace will be like as well. But also reflect on how you did. How did you do with those SAR stories you prepared? Do you need to tweak any of them? Are there things that you could change? Did you find yourself fidgeting a lot? What can you do if that's something that you did? Just really think about your performance and think about how you can do better for the next one.
Page 13 in your MBA interview guide has a post-interview checklist, which actually use. The MBA guide on interviewing is quite comprehensive and good. So before you interview, have a quick review of it.
It also includes common questions. So you might not even have to use Google.
Okay, so how to be an effective interviewer. So there's a few tips here. Yeah.
There is a question upon the end of an interview. Is it good practice to ask for the business card for the interviewers? As a non-native speaker of English, sometimes it is not easy to get the person's name correct.
Oh, what a brilliant idea. Thanks for sharing. For sure, that's a great idea. Gives you their contact information, the correct spelling of their name for your follow-up email thank you that you're going to do that Katie's talked about. So that's great.
And also remember in your interview prep, we forgot about this before, but LinkedIn actually has a feature now where people can pronounce their names for you on their profile. So you could make sure that you're looking at that before the interview to make sure that you are saying their name correctly.
Okay, great. So here's my top tips for improving your performance as an interviewer. You guys will probably be able to appreciate these based on your past exercise. So definitely understand the position you're interviewing for and develop your questions based on the competencies that are required in the interview. Next is, if possible, and I know timelines are often short and again, as I said, you're trying to fit this in with your regular day-to-day work, but before you meet with a candidate, have a quick review of their resume. It's respectful to the candidate that you're interviewing, and it also allows you to be a more informed interviewer. Outline the interview structure for the candidate. So really and truly, you should do this at the time that you're calling and booking the interview. So you should be telling them the interview will be an hour and a half long. It will be, consist of behavioral-based interview questions. There will be a test at the end. Most important is don't try to surprise or trick the candidate unless that's a requirement of the job. And typically it's not. So some interviewers have this philosophy. They're going to try to put the candidate on the spot. But remember, the top candidates that you're trying to recruit often have multiple options. And if you surprise them or trick them, they may not have a positive impression of you as a manager or as of the organization. So try to prepare them as much as possible for what's going to happen in the interview. Listen more than you talk. Obviously you have to answer the questions and maybe you want to share stuff about the position and the organization beforehand, but it's about active listening to really understand what the candidate can bring to the role. Obviously be polite and professional, be empathetic. We're all going through challenges, particularly now. You've seen some technology challenges that we've had that may happen with an interviewer. So be patient, be empathetic. It may also happen with you. So, treat everyone with kindness and respect, and that's going to get you a long way as an interviewer. The other piece is debrief as soon as possible after you've met with the candidate. So work with your interviewing partners if you have more than one person in the interview. I would suggest creating a grading rubric. So where you might have a 5-point scale or a 4-point scale, with one being kind of you grading a candidate's response based on a competency. What is their level of skill in that competency? So 1 might be entry level, 4 might be mastery of that competency. That grading rubric or quantitative review after the candidate, once you've maybe gone through a week of interviews, to go back and look at how you quantified the candidate's responses will really help you make an informed decision. And then finally, this is a best practice that often we don't do, but really good organizations do it. If a candidate has taken the time to come in and meet with you, then I think it's respectful to follow up with that candidate, regardless of what the outcome is of so lots of employers will only follow up with the selected candidate, and that leaves the other 3 or 4 people that were interviewed kind of wondering what's happening. Follow up with them, let them know that you really appreciated meeting with them, but that you've selected a candidate with a better match of skills and credentials. Again, it allows that candidate to potentially feel respected by the organization. They are more likely to apply again if there's another position that comes available because they've been treated in a professional way. And also, you never know, your target candidate may not accept the job and you may need to go to your number 2. So treat everyone respectfully. Okay, so that kind of wraps up our resume interview seminar. I'm just checking our time here.
So pretty close to back on track.
Good. Okay. So basically, I want to talk a little bit about the assignment instructions. They were sent to you in the package of information. Also, it will be uploaded on U of M Learn on Tuesday next week, as well as the slides and and all the materials will be there that you've already received. But basically what we'd like you to do, second 50% of your mark, is to book a mock interview with a career advisor on the career portal for Katie, for Michelle, and for Kathy, and that information is and their contact information is in your package. You must have completed your mock interview by June 18th. Please give us a week, because what we're doing is we're developing questions based on the job position that you applied for in Seminar 1. So we'll be using the resume and cover letter and that job posting to develop mock interview questions for you. So you should also be preparing based on that job description that you provided to us in January. Don't leave it to the last minute, because we have jobs, right? So we have meetings, etc., scheduled. So please book at least a week in advance. So you should not leave your booking until June 18th. Okay, is where I'm going on this. Dress as you would for an interview. Pajamas on the bottom, dress shirt on the top. I can't see, so don't worry about that. And then practice answering standard interview questions, which you will be asked, and also questions based on the competencies outlined in the job. We'll provide you feedback. And the one thing I didn't say is, if you would like a mock interview with me, you need to email me directly and then we'll book something. Katie and I will also be scheduling interview sessions during the week, Monday to Friday, either early morning or evening, for those of you who are not able to attend between 8:30 and 4:30 on a Monday to Friday. But we will only pick a couple of days to do that each. So you will have to fit into that time schedule. So we're not going to have it open till June 18th to have us working evenings and mornings.
And for that, Career Portal doesn't allow me to create meeting times outside of our set workday. So what will happen is I will post that availability. The evenings that I'm choosing will go up on Aurora, and then you'll email me to set those up. Mock interviews are scheduled to be about 45 minutes long.
Yeah, 20 minutes of mock interview, and then 10 to 20 minutes of feedback for you.
A quick question, Kelly and Katie. If rejected from a job position, is it okay to ask for the reason, just so that we can improve on ourselves?
Yes, it's okay to ask. You likely will not get a response. So most HR people are told not to discuss why candidates are not selected, because it opens up a whole slate of potential issues for them. So it's not in their best interest to do that. If you if you know the person or you've created a relationship with the person, it's possible they may give you some feedback, but it's not likely. Never hurts to ask, right? If you don't ask, you're not going to get. So that's what I would say. Okay, guys, so we need to move because I want to give you at least 10 or 15-minute break here to get your head in the game. So basically what's going to happen in the next hour and 15 minutes, starting at 10:30. So I would like it if you would be back in front of your screens by 10:25. Again, I'm going to reiterate, do not leave this room. Okay, if you leave the Zoom meeting, I have to spend the next 15 minutes putting you in groups, manually assigning you in groups. If you turn off the meeting and reconnect to the Zoom meeting, you won't be in a breakout room and it will cause some problems. And as you've seen, we are we have some problems. So please do not leave the room. Turn yourself camera off, turn yourself on mute, but leave yourself present in this Zoom meeting so that I'm able to properly assign you to rooms. So you'll be assigned to a breakout room with 4 other students. So there's 5 students in a room. You'll have 1 business guest. The business guests have been given questions. So they'll ask each student a different question, and you will have 2 minutes to answer the question. Now, we need to assign one person in the room to be a timekeeper. So once you get into your rooms, if you could self-select a timekeeper just to keep track, because if the first student takes 5 minutes to answer the question, you will not get to all the students. What will happen is what it says on the screen is that you will receive instant feedback and recommendations. That's not going to happen. We don't have time. So what's going to happen is they're not employers, sorry. The business guests are going to ask each student a question, and then at the end, there should be 2 or 3 minutes where they can give general feedback. And based on their expertise and insights and knowledge of what's happening in recruitment trends currently. So learn from each other, listen to each other's answers. You'll hear answers that you go, oh, wow, that was really good. You'll hear answers while people are struggling a little bit. So learn from that as well. And it may be you. So learn from that. The guests, again, as I said, have been told that you have not prepared. You've had no time really to absorb and apply what you've learned in this seminar. This is just an opportunity for you to practice a little bit. So most of them are very empathetic about that, and hopefully it'll give you some good feedback. You'll be moved every 15 minutes. So actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. Business guests will be moved every 15 minutes. So you're going to stay in the same group for the whole hour, hour and 5 minutes. And then, so every 15 minutes, you'll get a new business guest. They should quickly introduce themselves and start, and they have a new set of questions. Okay, so any questions on that? It's fast. It's fun. For the business guests, it'll be really disrupting because we'll start moving them as soon as we tell them. So they may not even have a chance to say goodbye to you in the room if they're the first or second guest. We'll send a broadcast message saying we're moving our guests now. And hopefully it all works. Fingers crossed. Geez, compassion for your instructors using technology. Okay, great. So don't leave the Zoom room. Turn your cameras off, mute yourself. Go and have a few minutes break. See you back here in about 10, 12 minutes. Thank you.